I had a corporate career for 40 plus years. I'm an industrial chemist. I was doing research and development. Coming into the art world, people say, oh, scientists and artists are very different. So I say, well, what makes a good artist? Where does an artist start? Art starts with observation. An artist is looking at the world, taking it in. Scientists are the same. We start off by observing the world. We take a slightly different tack. We want to understand what we're observing and maybe explain it in mathematical terms. There's more commonality than we tend to give credit for. Artists will, in my experience, will often talk about kind of intuition, and that's seen as more of an artistic characteristic. I think it's a very human thing. The third eye, the intuition of our mind. And that's very important in art. But I'd say it's also important in science, because science isn't just thinking through logically. When I was working, there would be intuition involved in trying to solve a problem that I've used logic on, but not come up with a solution. But our minds are incredible, and that intuition, that ability of our subconscious to make connections that we then perceive in our conscious mind. Say, oh yeah, let's try that. It might not work, but it might work. Let's look at it.
Welcome to another edition of Chasing the Timeless. And today I have with me Tony Nickalls, who owns a couple galleries, art galleries here in Milwaukee.
I do, yes. Yeah, Tony Nickalls, Aquae and Nguvu gallery and studio. I now have two spaces here next door to each other in the Marshall building in Milwaukee.
So how did you get into the gallery owning business?
That's an interesting question, right? I had a corporate career for 40 plus years. I'm an industrial chemist. I was doing research and development. Came to Milwaukee 2009, working for a Japanese company, having fun doing R&D. While I was here, I met Deborah Bremer, who runs Portrait Society Gallery up on the 5th floor of the Marshall building. And in 2013, started helping her with her gallery, working on Saturdays, evenings, and eventually going to New York to art shows and selling art in New York with Deborah. That was kind of how I got involved with galleries. The reason I was interested in art in the first place was, although I was trained as a scientist, and if I talk about the English education system, it specializes very early. So the last 2 years of high school, I did basically maths, physics, chemistry. We did one or two other things, but they were minor compared to the sciences. Mm-hmm. One of the other things I did was a history of 20th century painting. And that got me really interested in being in the art room. I'm not sure how much it was getting hands-on or whether it was listening to Pink Floyd on a record player in the art room outside school time. But I got involved with that, and it got me going to exhibitions, galleries in London where I lived at the time. That kind of got me interested in art. And ever since then, I've kind of looked at visual arts, particularly going to museums wherever I've been living or visiting, looking at art throughout my life. For a long time, I lived in Northeast Pennsylvania, which is not culturally dead, but it's not a very active area. It's fairly rural and post-industrial because all the coal mines closed in the 50s. The other industries left in the 60s. And actually, when I arrived there in 85, I lived in one of the oldest counties in the country because there wasn't any work for young people in the 70s and 80s. So they'd left the area. To satisfy my cultural interests, I used to go into the Philadelphia Art Museum, which was a couple of hours away. That was something I did regularly, going to some of the blockbuster shows they had there and visiting. So I've always had an interest in art. When I started doing gallery work here, I found how supportive the art community is in Milwaukee. A lot of people here, I always quote, I know a number of artists who've gone to LA or gone to New York and done their 10 years or so on the coasts, and then come back to Milwaukee to make their art in an environment they find more sustaining rather than competitive.
That's really interesting, hearing about the different types of art cultures in Milwaukee. I mean, I met you at a gallery night here in Milwaukee, and there's several sectors of Milwaukee that have their own gallery night themes. I spent my whole time just in this building going around and seeing
Sure, yeah.
fascinating
there's
art.
half a dozen galleries, and on gallery night, the 25 or so artist studios tend to open up as well. So you can go in and talk to artists, look at where they work.
Right. So you grew up in London?
London, yeah.
Okay.
In the near suburbs, so
Okay.
I could get the train into London, as I say, go to exhibitions,
Right.
concerts.
Right.
I actually grew up a mile from where David Bowie wrote Ziggy Stardust. So that's that's the context of my youth.
Right. What fascinated me, what you're talking about, you studied the math, the physics, and the chemistry. Then you also mentioned the art history. Excuse me. Did you take that art history at the same time you're taking those classes?
Yeah, it was. It's very different from the American system. As I say, in high school, the last 2 years, most of my work was science related. You chose 3 subjects. It's a little bit different now, but still fairly focused on where you're going beyond high school.
Yeah. So why did you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I had to do one or two things. I did a short course on creative writing, and I did this course in the art department on the history of 20th century painting.
Were you expecting to go into more of the technical side of stuff when you graduated?
Oh yeah. I graduated from high school, went to a university where, again, in the UK, it's very concentrated. I did a bachelor's in 3 years. 2/3 of my time was chemistry. A ninth of my time was math to support the chemistry, and the last 2/9 were some other science. I actually did geology. And that's very different from a liberal arts education that most people do in the North America for their bachelor's.
Yeah. I find like within the United States, you have the liberal arts colleges, but then you also have, like, my wife went to engineering college, or in Madison, you can focus just on like computers. And I remember talking to a professor there. My son was looking at going to a liberal arts college or going to Madison to study computer stuff. And the professor at this liberal arts college had studied in Madison, but he studied as a master's degree in computer science, but his undergraduate was in liberal arts. And when he went into his master's degree, he said that he felt a little behind some of the students who had gone to Madison as far as the technical stuff of the computer writing, but he was a better writer and more able to apply his computer degree to things that every people use because he had that liberal arts.
Yeah, I'm not saying the UK concentration is better or worse. It's just different, and
right.
I think people need to understand that. I have 3 daughters. 2 of them went to liberal arts colleges, got their bachelors, and what I liked was they had a lot of choice about the courses they did. And they didn't need to say, oh, from day one, I'm going to be doing chemistry. They could choose. And in fact, they did more liberal arts type
When did, do you think you would have done it differently? Studied something else looking back? Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, and I think I didn't know anything when I was 17, kind of deciding what I was going to do. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
so that's I find a difficult question to answer.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
going to ask a lot of difficult
why,
questions.
why did I do? I was good at math. I
Right.
enjoyed chemistry and physics. What I found was when I went to university and studied chemistry, I really enjoyed laboratory hands-on work. I mean, in undergrad, that's still very much kind of doing a laid out experiment. But when I graduated, I went and worked in a research and development lab for a company making products, trying to understand them. So that was where my career started.
Yeah. A lot of these questions I'm asking, because I feel like I went through a similar background. When I went to a liberal arts college, but I focused on economics because I felt that's where the careers are, and that's how you make money. And then I went on to public administration for my master's degree, and then I studied law. And the whole time, there has always been this other side of me, this artistic side of me that I chose to place secondary because I felt it wasn't a proper career. And now at this point in my life, I'm realizing that I've been fighting this, my full self along the way. And I was wondering if you had some kind of epiphany at some point to say, I want to look a different way.
That's interesting. I don't like to try and second guess myself. I mean, I have three daughters, raised them with my ex-wife in Pennsylvania, had a science job. That was fine for the time. I got a little bit of cultural input. I also understood a lot about the economy and the geology and the nature of Northeast Pennsylvania, which was very interesting to me. I've changed direction, as a number of people have said to me, relatively recently.
Okay.
I mean, as I described, I started a corporate job when I started doing gallery work. My corporate job came to an end, and I was very aware. I've been at my office at 7 o'clock in the morning for 40 plus years. I need to be careful. And I was thinking about that, not really thinking about retiring, but the job came to an end. And I said, okay, I'm going to have some discipline. I'm going to get up each day and I'm going to dance for an hour. I'm going to work on the condo for an hour, and I'm going to paint for an hour. Again, second guessing those choices. I don't know, but I wanted some structure, and that helped me settle into not having a job which had been very much a focus of a large portion of my awake time. As I did that, several things came along. One is I got involved in ecstatic dance, which is just a free form of dance, and met some people from a group called Movement Medicine, which is out of Europe. And they teach to use dance as a community event to treat trauma, because they look at so many indigenous communities use dance not as we do in the Western world to, oh, hey, I might meet my partner, I want to dance, but as a community dancing that can be a celebration, or it can be a tackling grief, which, by the way, is what this exhibit is about grief, and the importance of movement for people to deal with their emotions. And I did a number of courses Fortunately, I met these people and did one in Chicago just before COVID. But most of the courses I did were by Zoom with sort of like 50 other people dancing individually in our homes, kind of thing. It was an interesting but very positive experience. The guy that leads it has a very shamanic practice. He's spent a lot of time with a couple of shaman in the Amazonian area, and also toured around the world and met with a number of different what we'd regard as leaders, but not traditional political leaders, kind of thing. So
Tell me about that. The leaders, but not political leaders.
Well, we in the US, if you say shaman, you say, oh, kind of this is not leadership as we understand it. Although I would say there's a lot more good in somebody in that kind of position than there is in most of the most of the leadership we experience in the Western world. I see leadership as being a lot more about serving and stewarding resources and people. And I don't see that happening with our political leadership these days.
Yeah, leadership, you really find at the community level.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
what did I? So I started doing these movement medicine classes. They used to be sort of like a 6 or 7 week run, and I did those. I also started training to teach yoga. I'd been doing yoga since 2016, so practicing 2 or 3 times a week, and I found that really helpful just to practice. I'm not quite sure why I took the teacher training, but the person that ran it encouraged me to do it, and I really benefited. And after 40 years in the commercial world, going back into studying again was really hard. And there was a tremendous amount of information in the yoga teachers program, but I enjoyed that, and it helped me particularly understand humanity. I really like the way, particularly Eastern societies often regard things. They talk about the body in a different way. We talk about the body. We have our mind in the West, and we have our hearts. In yoga, we talk about the chakras, more detail about what it means for the body to be connected with the mind.
We just had a podcast where we talked about body consciousness.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was teaching this morning, and we were talking about breath and doing alternate nostril breathing, just to make us more all aware. We have 2 nostrils, and you can actually feel slight differences from side to side. We need to regard the body as very much part of our humanity, not something that's it's a pain because it's not perfect. It's actually pretty miraculous, all the things our bodies do.
So with the dance, a lot of the stuff that you've kind of incorporated later in life, is there something that you're learning or discovering, or something that's pulling you or driving you?
I hope so. I hope I'm still learning. I mean, as I say, the yoga teacher training, and I've been teaching for 5 years now. I constantly go back, look at different poses, asana, try and understand them more, just to broaden my understanding of the philosophy.
What do you learn from these poses? Like, because for me, I think of yoga as, okay, that really stretches, or that hurts, and my body feels good after all. But what's the study of the poses?
I think a lot of it is, about stretching, feeling our body. Um, uh, there's a book that was written a while ago called The Body Keeps a Score, that I think, in Western thinking, we think everything is in our mind, but in reality, our body contains a lot of our history. And people have often said, sometimes in yoga I get emotional. Why do you get emotional? Because you're dealing with your hips and your shoulders, key parts of our body, that contain part of our history, particularly emotional history.
Yeah. And you talk about like being aware of things in life, and the yoga and the shamanic stuff, the art requires a different way of looking at things.
I don't know if I've said this to you before, but coming into the art world, people say, "Oh, scientists and artists are very different." So I say, "Well, what makes a good artist? Where does an artist start?" What I point to is that it really art starts with observation. An artist is looking at the world, taking it in. And what we say about young kids who want to be artists, well, are you drawing? Are you looking at the world around you, taking it into your mind and letting it transmit through your hand to a drawing? But starting with observation and being able to put that into some art form, what you've observed. Scientists are the same. We start off by observing the world. We take a slightly different tack. We want to understand what we're observing and maybe explain it in mathematical terms. But essentially, if a scientist isn't observing, they're not going to do good work.
Uh-huh.
You've got to look at what's around you.
Right. So the
So
go ahead.
So I'd say there's more commonality than we tend to give credit for.
And so if the scientists are trying to understand what they're observing, how would you describe what a good artist needs to do when they observe?
Artists will, in my experience, will often talk about kind of intuition, and that's seen as more of an artistic characteristic. I think it's a very human thing. Yoga and Eastern talk about the third eye, the intuition of our mind, and that's very important in art. But I'd say it's also important in science, because science isn't just thinking through logically. I exercise in the morning. When I was working, I would get up, exercise, and it would be a time when my mind's not terribly active, but often I would just be exercising and think, oh, why don't we kind of combine that with that? Right? There would be intuition involved in trying to solve a problem that I've used logic on, but not come up with a solution. But our minds are incredible, and that intuition, that ability of our subconscious to make connections that it then we then perceive in our conscious mind. We say, oh yeah, let's try that. It might not work, but it might work. Let's look at it.
Yeah, I think being active is, I don't do it enough, and I know most people don't do it enough, but it helps us get in touch with something more about who we are, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, that being active, it works for me, but I would say we all have a duty to understand how our minds work. For me, doing some exercise occupies some of my mind and lets ideas float around and the intuition to work. For other people, it might be going for a walk, or other people, it might be just sitting down, clearing your mind and meditating, and then coming back to a problem or something you want to solve in terms of how you're going to make a painting work.
Yeah.
I think we all have that, as I say, that duty to work out, how do I take care of my mind so that it can function as it's as it can do.
What are some things besides just yoga and art that you do to take care of your mind?
Um, I exercise, yeah, and I kayak. Um, I live just here on the Milwaukee River, and I like to get in a kayak, power up for a mile or two, and then turn around and come back slowly, just kind of just observing the world and letting my thoughts go where they will.
I never really thought about the different view of the world you get on the river.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. I hadn't done much city kayaking. I was mostly doing it on the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania, very rural. I came here and said, oh, I'm in the city, but it's very interesting. You get a different view.
I remember I used to live in the Virgin Islands and went out on a friend's boat looking back at the island. And it was so different, the
Yeah.
things you'd see.
Mhm.
And when I also went to Haiti, and it was so intense and rough and tough and despairing and so much activity. And you go downtown and cars are literally scraping against each other to try to like fit through an intersection. It could take you half an hour to go a couple blocks, and buses are parked. There isn't a car that isn't just totally scraped up. And the rivers are just full of garbage, and it was so much intense stuff happening all around. And then I was looking out at a boat out at sea and thinking back about the time when I was in the Virgin Islands and
Yes.
thinking,
Yeah.
I bet this looks like a peaceful island from out there.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
but it's a totally different perspective. Um, good.
Our river here, I'm told, I came here in 2009 and told if in the 60s and 70s, nobody wanted to live by the river, the Milwaukee River in the city, because it was too polluted. It is possible to come back and to improve things. And I know we're still spending a fortune on trying to get rid of PCBs and other contaminants in the river.
Right. So you started off helping out in somebody's gallery. That's how you got involved with gallery work and traveled just helping them.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. That was on a volunteer basis. And my corporate vacation was to go to New York to the Outsider show and sell art there. And that was fun.
Uh, What was the transition to actual ownership?
So COVID came along, which changed a lot of things. I left the commercial work I was doing in June of 2020. And at that point, a friend of mine owned this space, had a studio and gallery here, and for family health reasons, they didn't want to be down here during COVID. So I just helped out by opening this gallery in on Fridays and Saturdays for them.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how long that went on for, but I was there when they decided to take their studio home and to give up the space. So I thought, okay, I know the people that I've been working a gallery in the building for a good number of years. I went to the building and said, yeah, I'd like to take over this space. And
So it all kind of came from volunteering and stuff that you loved, and then a situation landed in your lap.
yeah, I was going to say, I still
Okay.
see this as volunteering.
Yeah.
In the sense that I do this because, yeah, it is work, but I do it like this show is Jamie Wilms. This is work from the last 5 years. And it's given her an opportunity to have her work shown in Milwaukee. to be seen by a significant number of people. And I really like to do a show that is a body of work because it gives people more of an insight into what the artist is trying to achieve. And I've lost track now how many shows I've done in the 4.5 years, but it's a good number, and they've mostly been either solo, been some shows with 2 artists, and 1 or 2 group shows.
Do you do work? Do you put your
I do, but I've not made much recently. When I was doing a lot of the dancing, I was painting stars that I danced with, and I painted them for the elements, for earth, water, fire, and air. And I also made a piece that was an homage to Agnes Martin, who's 60s and 70s minimalist artist. Wasn't recognized enough at the time because she was in New York where all the guys were getting recognition for their minimalism, and she does very meditative work. So I made an homage to her.
Uh-huh. I think it's interesting how you can be in the art world and your focus is other people and showcasing them and you know, the same reason people like going to art galleries is because they like looking at other people's art and they think, well, I can't be in this industry because I'm not a good artist or I haven't trained myself in this. But you found a way to bring in almost more diverse career as a gallery owner than you could be as an individual artist, maybe.
Yes, yeah. I'm not a person who kind of wants to second guess kind of why. I had an opportunity. I stepped through a door, and similar thing happened last November because I was doing a show that was called Unraveling the Threads of Modern Masculinity, and it started off with 7 artists, and Antonio Testelin, who's a sculptor who I represent, he got these guys together in Madison. They didn't know each other, and we just had a Saturday evening barbecue together. These guys who range from mid-20s to mid-50s, they didn't know each other. They were very open and talking about saying, yeah, I want to understand more what it means to be masculine in 2025, and I want to make work about it. So we said, yeah, we'll put together a show, make some specific work for this show. The problem I had was it started off as 7, it became 13 artists. And I said, well, it's not going to fit in this space here. I went next door asking if I could borrow their space for a couple of months. And they said, oh, we're actually leaving. So that worked out very well. I took over that space temporarily, did this show on masculinity, which from a sales point of view wasn't wonderful, but it was, I feel, a very significant show. Antonio and I, who kind of gathered the artists and curated it together, we're trying to get it to travel. We're trying to find different places to show that, because I think it's a worthwhile topic.
What did you guys discover?
We were very had a big emphasis on saying this, we're not preaching what we think masculinity is. We want to have art on the wall that just asks questions, makes people kind of challenge. I have this, I talk about Marlboro Man. Coming from England, the advertisement of Marlboro cigarettes with this guy on a horse who's looking out kind of, I'm an individual, I'm going to conquer the landscape kind of thing. That's not a very good picture, and generates a lot of problems in society if we don't work as communities.
And I think trying to put a cultural label on what masculinity is stifles people. And I remember growing up in high school in the 80s, and there's one way to be. And if you diverted from that, your life was hell. And
Right.
so
Yes.
I
Yeah.
remember going away out of a small town in Wisconsin in Whitewater and moving up the Twin Cities to a liberal arts college. And I came across this fellow student who celebrated his gayness. And I felt uncomfortable because like, why are you broadcasting this? You're just opening yourself up for the rest of the world to attack you. And that was a big transition in my life to see from a world where there's only one way to be masculine to a world where people celebrated being themselves.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great thought, Andrew. And people have talked about kind of masculine and feminine, and our society wants to be very this kind of you're one thing or the other. There's no allowance for any variation from that. And we can maybe think about a line, but I'm not sure that's a helpful metaphor either. I mean, or maybe a circle or something. But yeah, we're each individuals and we vary a lot. And then we need to work out who we are, which I think was one of the things the show was saying. Yeah, working out who you are. I mean, I'm recognizable. I have an English accent. I'm bald, and I wear high heels. I stand out, but I'm happy to do that in the same way you talked about that guy. There are a lot of people in the art world, particularly in their late teens, 20s, 30s, who are trying to find their way. And I know a number of people have said to me, well, thank you, Tony, for just, you are who you are kind of thing. You dress the way you dress. That's been helpful to me to see somebody just deciding what they're like, because I'm not quite sure what I'm like yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was,
during COVID, so I was watching, I think Sam Smith, a musician, who labeled himself as non-binary. That was a completely new concept to me, completely. And at the time, I was studying Advaita Vedanta, which is a kind of a somewhat of a part of Hinduism, but more just a looking at yourself and your universal spirit and dropping off all the identification qualities that society has put on us that we're carrying. And who are you when you leave everything that you've learned behind, what's left? And I realized that the gender has been taught to me. And different cultures have different ways of expressing gender. So I thought, what if I just drop that identity and not try to be one thing or another? And I found it opened myself up. Still have I love rugby. I played rugby most of my life. So I can do construction work. So in that sense, I feel like, hey, I can be as manly as everybody else. I can go on more wilderness canoe trips and backpacking trips than anybody. But at the same time, I've always, I think the process of trying to drop an identity for myself opened me up to see other qualities that I had in myself that I wasn't allowing myself to feel because I felt that would make me gay and I'm not gay, or that would make me a woman and I'm not identifying as that, but I could look at flowers and really appreciate them. It just opened me. And so I think there's so many ways people can be that they don't even know who they are because they're trying to fit within a box.
Yeah. We had in the show we had one sculpture, and I'm losing his name, Gene Delcourt, who's he's of Native American heritage, was in the military for a long time, and now does wood carving. He produced this carving of a man kneeling by a grave that was of a child, and they were crying, and his statement was just along the lines, why can't men cry about the death of a child? It makes no sense.
Yeah.
I forget where I was going with that, but that's, yeah, it's that.
I think there's a lot of people that struggle by wearing a mask, especially when it's bad enough when you have your own rules that you put on yourself, but when you're wearing a mask because you're afraid of what other people are going to say.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of weight in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's why I felt happy to do what I've done. As I say, and I know a lot of people at VAR Gallery, where Josh, who runs that, has done a great job of supporting young artists coming out of MyAd, particularly, and yeah, allowing people to find their way and find their identity.
And I think, especially in art, it seems most obvious, of opening up your every possible sense that you have of what the world is around you. And to really open yourself up to the world around you, you have to let go of the things that you've created, the barriers or the expectations or the labels, and just see the world as it is without bringing so much of your.
Yeah, and I think for a long time, I mean, I lived a very middle class life, and kind of, yeah, society, you think society is saying, well, they're ideals, and this is what the ideal family should be. And one of the things I think about, there's a great show on at Hawthorne Gallery at the moment, and I can't remember the artist's name. It's very conceptual. So he's got a small pyramid of sand, and then he's photographed every grain of sand in this pyramid, and the photographs are on the wall. And it's actually from, I think, a Jamaican beach, and it's a coral beach. And the photographs are amazing because they're a lot of sandy beaches. You just see a lot of quartz. These are all sorts of different things. One of the things he talks about is these broken shells, signs of life, but also signs of death. So I talked to him on the opening night and said, yeah, this shell I found snorkeling in the Indian Ocean. Right? It's not got its spikes on. It's been rolling around in the waves. It's completely broken. It was a creature's home that made this shell. It represents both life and death, and the fact that the world erodes you. And I like those concepts of, yeah, we're part of this world. We're not perfect. We're not this ideal that society puts on us. And I was going to say very few people are, but I think I'm discovering in my later years, a lot of people are imperfect, yeah, and have had trauma of various sorts that they are dealing with. And as a society, I see our job as helping one another deal with the traumas that we've been through. That's why I was involved in movement medicine and yoga. I think they're both ways of dealing with the trauma that I think probably all of us have.
Yeah. And we're told to be, we're not necessarily told directly, but we're told indirectly to be quiet about it. Because so often, if you bring up a traumatic experience to somebody, that makes them uncomfortable.
Yes.
And you learn right away, it's like, oh, this isn't common party conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So trauma, like you said, so many people have trauma. There's so many things from our past that that affect us, but we aren't necessarily aware how it's affecting us.
Yes. Yeah. I don't outwardly, I don't foresee myself having had a lot of excessive trauma in my life. But then I went to an English boarding school for 4 years. And that, in reality, that's pretty traumatic because there's so much peer pressure to conform and so much kind of dominance of the older kids over the younger kids.
I did. I don't want to step on your feet. Do you have more you want to say?
No.
Yeah.
Just
I
I sometimes say to people, I went to Hogwarts, kind of,
Yeah.
but it wasn't quite so good as Hogwarts. But it was an experience. I was a teenager. I think we all experience things. In some ways, I say going away to school as a teenager meant that I rebelled against the school because it was the school that told me I couldn't go down to the pub when I was 15 on a Saturday evening. It wasn't my parents telling me that. And that in some ways helped my relationship with my parents, that teenage rebellion was against school rules.
You never know what's good or bad.
That's what I experienced. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Would have I been different if I'd gone to a day school? I don't know.
Who knows?
Kind of that.
I like your thought about like not trying to think back so much about like this caused this or I'm choosing this, but like this is where I'm doing right now.
No, yeah. I mean, I see life as very much. I probably step on people's toes. I don't think we understand time. We have this life that we experience on a second by second basis, and I think that's who we are and what we are in that time that we have here. So yeah, if we spend our time regretting our decisions, then I mean we should think about them and learn from them, but let's not think too much about going back and changing them. But just progressing on and doing what we can today.
And everything served a purpose somehow.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to mention earlier about teenagers and stuff is I had an opportunity there's a program in Chicago where they took kids who were kids of color from urban schools who were probably destined for prison. And of those, which are a lot of them, some of them applied to be part of this program. So they had some initiative to change.
Right.
And they had to commit to 3 weekends a month for 4 years of doing things with nonprofit groups that get scholarships, that get help with their grades. Their very first experience in this 3-year program was to do a backpacking trip together. So we bring all these kids together. They've never seen each other. And we're backpacking through Wisconsin. And yeah, one kid saw his uncle overdose on heroin. Another kid was sitting on a park bench and had his best friend shot in the face. Another kid said, I don't know if my girlfriend's pregnant right now. I have no idea. There's so much trauma. But after just a couple days of being put in a situation where it's supportive and they're listened to and cared about and recognized as a person, they blossomed. You know, they were giving each other back rubs and talking about like, how are we going to deal with this new type of friendship we have when we go back to our schools? Because there's a pressure to be the gangster, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, people are dying to have compassion in their life. But you can't show that in a lot of situations. But it just kind of shows that everybody's the same, really. And we give up on people easily without knowing, like, well, if you're acting out right now, it's probably because you've had a lot of shit going on in your life.
Yeah.
And if people know that you're going to be there for them on the long haul and really care about them, they turn towards that. It's a thing, human quality.
It's interesting. I learned so much from this movement medicine. They talk about archetypes, and one of them is the rescuer. This person who wants to rescue other. I very much identify with that. Oh yeah, there's somebody who's had trauma. I want to rescue. It's not a good archetype. It's how do we provide a supportive environment without being a rescuer? How do we just be a wise elder, they would say, kind of somebody just with wisdom, rather than trying to change somebody else, but just provide the environment that is going to help them.
There's a book I read by Ram Dass called How Can I Help? And he talked about the role of the helper. There's the role of the father, the role of the teacher, and then the role of the person that's volunteering in the orphanages because they're the helper. And what Ram Dass was saying is service is great, but you can also get burnt out on service if you're interacting with people as the helper and the person being helped. But just coming in as an equal with them is how you help people.
Yeah, because if you're a rescuer and this person's a victim, if all you do is emphasize those two roles, that's not going to change anybody.
Right. Because they can still be a victim.
As you were saying, coming. Yeah, we tend to stay with what we know. I'm a rescuer. I go and help people, and I'm a victim. I've kind of suffered all this trauma. We need to be, providing the environment that's going to help people. It's not easy.
I think it all starts with just getting to know yourself.
Yeah.
And when I walked into this gallery, I think we're probably standing right here, when you walked in and asked me some questions about the art. And I felt like you were generally intrigued on, well, what did I think? What did I see? Rather than coming in as a gallery owner, teacher.
One of the things I say about what I want to do in a gallery is, at gallery night, I often get a lot of people who just walk in, and particularly with this kind of conceptual art, they'll walk in, look at it, and walk out again. I see my job as a gallery person is to say something that helps that individual actually see the work and begin to look at it for themselves. I don't want to tell them what it means. I want them to look at it and get what they can from it.
Yeah. When I was trying to put a definition on what it meant for me to be non-binary, and I soon realized just stop with the whole point is not to have definition. So why am I sticking with definition? And I see we're both wearing fingernail polish here, and I saw a lawyer who is transgender, and I wrote to them about like, what's your experience going into this corporate world and then a law firm as expressing as yourself this way? And he said, people generally don't care as much as you care.
I think that's true. I mean, for a long time, I worked for a Japanese company, very not badly, but were socially conservative. And for a while, I was doing this. I was painting my nails at the weekend, and then I would take it off to go to work. And in the end, I decided, oh, this is me. I'm not going to do that. I'll do it. And in fact, you asked me about art. An art project I had was, I'm not sure it's worth the description. Being mathematical, I would start with a color on this nail on day one, and then the color would be put on this nail day two, this nail, so for 10 days, and then another color would follow it. And I had 7-day cycles, and I had 13-day cycles, and I had a 19-day cycle that went in the opposite direction. So I had a spreadsheet to work out which nail I was going to paint which color on which day. And it's my contribution to nail art.
Yeah. And I love that you don't have to just be creative in music, creative in art. There's science, math, all this stuff. When you go dig deep enough into it, is an exciting world, you know?
Well, scientists are creative. I mean, research and development is about finding something new. And that's why I talk about intuition in science, that, how do you get to something new?
Yeah.
We talk about, Newton and the apple falling on his head. There was something that triggered him to ask the question. Well, why? I'm not sure of my history. I assume he asked the question, well, why does it fall down? Why doesn't it fall off? Kind of what's going on with that?
There's so many big questions for the logical world to explore that requires creativity as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think just explore wherever you are, whatever you do, and just keep going on an adventure in your life. Tony, thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I've
being
enjoyed
here.
this. Yeah.
Been just a really fascinating discussion. I never know what the discussion is going to be like every time. And this has been great.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode and you know somebody that might be inspired by it, share it with them. To learn more about the show, go to chasingthetimeless.com.